Hey everybody, this is TJR, and this is a follow-up video to the CD versus vinyl video that I did about a week or so ago. There have been a lot of comments, and I want to thank everybody for their comments and for the discussion. I'd like to address some of these comments. I feel like there's some topics that should be brought up and discussed a little bit more and further. First, a comment by Denny Winter. I hope I've said the last name correctly. And Denny writes, my personal choice would be to have 12-inch album art and Blu-ray audio. And I think this is a great idea, for, just for high-end quality, audio. I think that's great. But I'll tell you, this is something I didn't bring up in the original video that I almost did put in, but I felt it was kind of getting too far off topic. When the CD first came along and his albums were being phased out, I remember thinking to myself, we really shouldn't lose the album packaging. What we should do is we should keep the album packaging. We should put the CD in like a little Mylar sleeve and stick that inside, the album packaging. This way we don't sacrifice the art. We don't sacrifice things like a full-size poster, extras like that, or extras like lyrics booklets and what have you. I always felt we should have kept that large vinyl look, but put the CD inside of that. That didn't happen, of course. I think that if that had happened, I don't think the music industry would have experienced the level of trouble that they experienced when Napster came along, when all the illegal downloading began to happen, and people just realized they didn't have to pay for music anymore. They could just simply download it for free. I think that would have gone a long way in preventing a lot of that. Not that it wouldn't have happened. I think it still would have happened. But I think a lot of people would have been very attached to the physical properties of that larger packaging, that they would have enjoyed having all of that came with it. And I think it would have convinced people to, just to purchase rather than to illegally download. And also I think it would have, people would have stayed more attracted to, high quality audio that you get from a WAV file versus the low quality audio that you would get from those really crappy compressed MP3s that you could download for free. Also, another commenter, Darwin's Chihuahua, linked to me a really great video that explained that the staircase example that I gave in my video is not completely correct. And in the video, the commentator on that video, who is a professional sound engineer, said that it's understandable why a lot of people will think that the digital signal looks like the staircase, example that I gave, and which I found on the internet and used, because he said that that example was created, that myth of the staircase was created by sound engineers like him, who he says should have known better, but used it as a kind of shorthand or a simplified way of explaining it to people like myself who are not sound engineers. And so it turns out I'm not completely correct with that example, but seeing as how this example was created by many sound engineers themselves to better explain it to people like me, hopefully I can be forgiven for using that example. But I do want to thank Darwin's Chihuahua for presenting that video to me and giving me a link to it. And I'll try to remember to leave a link here under the video description on this video so you can go take a look at that yourself too as well. And while I admit that maybe I use a somewhat incorrect example of what a digital waveform looks like, I still maintain that I feel that the digital recording can capture the full audio range as well as analog. I really believe we've accomplished this now. At the same time, though, just in my own comparisons, especially in referring to my comparison between the Elton John Captain Fantastic album on vinyl and on digital, there are inherent qualities to that vinyl audio that is just unique to that my ears hear and can't deny that they're hearing compared to the CD. I like them both, but they're both different, and I get different response to each one. Neither one is bad or worse. I like them both. And so I still think there might be just things that are inherent to vinyl that we can't measure scientifically, but that if your ear hears it, it's there. And I don't believe that this is just, you're just imagining you're hearing this. We're all, once again, designed differently. We all hear things differently. And I've compared this too many times to think I'm imagining things. And also, like I said before, I have made some comparisons where I hear no difference between the CD or the vinyl version of the same album. So I don't believe this is just something that, I or other people are just imagining. There's another comment by a viewer who uses the handle of Sungar, hopefully I say that right, who writes, "Thanks also for the possible reason that today's music sounds like garbage." Now this is a reference to my comments in regards to the loudness wars. And Sungar also goes on to say that now to try and weed out the overcompressed CDs from those that are not. Any suggestions? These days, I think you're mostly okay with most of today's contemporary CDs that are being released now. Most of the albums I listen to from streaming and then maybe go to listen to on CD if I like them good on streaming, I find no problems with. If I'm emotionally enjoying the music, if I'm emotionally moved by it, then obviously it's not overcompressed. That doesn't mean that if you're not moved by the music, it has been overcompressed. You just may not enjoy it as well. As far as earlier albums that were during this time of the loudness wars, which once again, somewhere early mid-2000s, going up sometime, in the later end of the 2000s, it's hard to define. But if you hear an album by an artist that you like and you think to yourself, I should be liking this album, but it's not moving me, that might be an indication that it's overcompressed. This is what I experienced with U2, with No Line on the Horizon, Elton John, The Captain and the Kid, Brandi Carlile, Give Up the Ghost, as I mentioned in my last video. And in each case, when I listened to it on vinyl, whoa, what a difference it made. Of course, there are albums that I'm always going to suspect might have been overcompressed because I say to myself, gosh, I should like this, and why am I not? But I'm never going to get the chance to find out because maybe it's just not available on vinyl or no longer available on vinyl, or it was just too expensive. And this brings me to another commenter who goes by the handle of initial M, Groningen, or Groningen, I don't know what the pronunciation is, who was talking about how high-priced the vinyl was and how it kind of put it out of their price range. And I have to kind of agree with this. I think a lot of this vinyl is way overpriced. I realize that we don't have the number of vinyl pressing plants we did back in the heyday of the vinyl era, and it's still being produced in a more limited quantity than, say, CDs are. So I understand that it has to be priced a little bit higher until there's a lot more mainstream acceptance. But I still kind of suspect that a lot of this is just a bit too overpriced. And I think it needs to come down in price. I also think that some of this reason for the pricing is the heavier 180 gram, audiophile vinyl. I've discovered that there's no difference in audio quality between a 180 gram, vinyl versus what we would refer to as a standard size vinyl. It's just that the vinyl is more durable and it's less likely to warp because it is thicker, is what I've read about it at any rate. I'm sure someone will contest me on that fact and say, oh, you're full of it. But I know this because when I bought Brandi Carlile's Give Up the Ghost used, it was not 180 gram vinyl. It was just, the standard, thin vinyl that I grew up with in the 70s. And of course, the audio was amazing compared to the CD because the CD had been overcompressed. And this brings me to my next example, which is Van Halen's most recent album, A Different Kind of Truth. I listened to that album and I kept thinking, this is great, but I should be digging it more. I should really be just rocking out to this. I'm not. And I kept thinking, I'll bet you this album is overcompressed. But I wasn't going to go buy the vinyl album new because it was like $40. Now you can't even find it. I mean, on eBay I find it, for selling way more than that. And there's just no way I'm going to pay that much for it. I mean, I recognize the CD is good, but I feel like it was probably just way overcompressed. I think I would have dug it a lot more if it hadn't been. Another recent example is the last album by Black Sabbath, 13. This was not, as, in my opinion, as heavily compressed as, say, the Van Halen album. It was still a little too compressed. I could still enjoy it. I still really like the album and recognize that it's a good album. But I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more if they just backed the compression off a little bit more. This album was produced by Rick Rubin, who does kind of have a bit of a reputation for overcompressing the albums that he produces. But yeah, I do think that a lot of this newer vinyl is way overpriced. In almost all of my vinyl to CD comparisons that I conducted during my experimental phase of this and that I mentioned in my last video, every single time, almost without exception, the vinyl I purchased was used, and that was the way I could afford to do it. Perhaps, though, one of the most interesting comments that I received came from a viewer named Cameron Eli, or Eli, E-L-Y. Cameron wrote, "I only listen to music on my laptop or cell phone. My music is all downloaded. When I want to listen to a new song, I will go to YouTube. I don't buy any physical CDs or vinyl or anything like that. All the music I need I can find online. I never got into vinyl as a kid because it wasn't really a thing when I was a kid. It doesn't mean the same to me as it does to you." And I really appreciated this comment because it's such a totally different perspective coming from a completely different viewpoint. And I do know that there's a generation out there that didn't grow up with any of this. And so vinyl CD doesn't really mean anything to them. Now, I sometimes do wonder myself why I'm still buying physical music when I can listen to everything on streaming services like Spotify and Tidal, and it takes up a lot less room, a lot less shelf space storing the physical music if I don't have it. Generally speaking, I use the streaming services like Spotify and Tidal to explore and listen to new things, and then if I really like something, I go out and purchase it. And quite more often than not, I purchase it on CD these days for the reasons I've already explained, unless there's some specific reason I want it on vinyl. The only thing I can say is, and once again, it's probably because I grew up with physical music, there is something about looking at the artwork for me. There's something about reading the liner notes as I'm listening and knowing, who produced this, who played what instruments where, who wrote what song. All these things fascinate me in the same way that when I watch a movie, later, if I get it on Blu-ray or DVD, I want the bonus features to explain to me more what happened, what was the genesis of the film, the creation, the writing, how were these shots done. All of those things have fascinated me ever since I was a kid, and the same is true with music. All these things fascinate me. Even before I became a musician, who did what, and who wrote what, and what was the inspiration for this song. I've never stopped being fascinated by this, and to me, the physical music is a gateway to that, and that's why I think I still want that. And also, to me, there's just something about that connection of looking at the pictures, the artwork, the photos, and reading the lyrics in my hand, and that's why I love it when those things are included. And of course, that experience is bigger on vinyl than it is on CD, and that's why I thought we never should have gotten rid of that packaging. We should have just put the CD inside the 12-inch artwork. And Cameron, if you're watching this, once again, I really did appreciate your comment and your perspective. I know that there are some people from my generation who would probably read that and say, well, what does this kid know about music? Does not experience music. But there is no right or wrong way to experience music. It's however it moves you. What I do wonder is, what I would like to ask you, Cameron, if you're watching, is, and maybe I should just write you on the comments page. I did leave a response, but I didn't think of this till just now. But what I would probably think of is when you're watching stuff on YouTube, and by the way, I find YouTube to be a very cumbersome way to listen to music. I don't like that at all, but once again, to each their own. But when you are listening to music online or, digitally downloaded, do you have any curiosity in knowing, who's playing on this? Who's playing that saxophone part on that song? Who's doing the drumming there? Who wrote this song? What was the inspiration? Does any of that fascinate you? Maybe it does, and maybe you find online outlets that tell you all this. I don't know. I'm just curious. if any of that intrigues you at all. And like an album artwork, I guess you can download that too. But does any of that intrigue you as to, what's the reason for the artwork, et cetera, et cetera. At any rate, though, just some few questions I would wonder about, and hopefully, if you're watching this follow-up video, you can respond to that. Be curious to know what you have to say. In closing, I want to also just mention two other comments from two other viewers here. One is from Heavy J, who says, "Vinyl for me has an experience that you just don't get with CD or MP3. And then another viewer, John Caulfield, writes, all I can add to this debate is that since getting a hold of a Project Essential 3 turntable some months back, I have regained my passion for rock music again. And I've told, I think I told both of these viewers that I think that's great. If you're getting an experience that you can't get anywhere else with vinyl, then I think that's fantastic. And if having that turntable and having the vinyl has reignited your passion for rock music, once again, I think that is absolutely fantastic. And there was, to add to that, there was a video that I watched from a channel called The Needle Drop that I occasionally watch some of his album reviews, where instead of reviewing an album, he talked about his audio setup, and he had a friend who with him on the video who helped him put together his audio setup. And something that they both said about this, they talked a lot about the different types of headphones and turntables they've experimented with and what they like the best. But one thing that they said that I want to make really clear that I think is the great thing is that it doesn't matter what anybody has to say about your audio setup. What matters the most is how it sounds to you. Not to anyone else, but how it sounds to you. And if you think your audio setup, it sounds great and sounds good for you, then it is. And now maybe in time your listening taste will evolve. Maybe you'll go to other things. Maybe you'll try other setups. That's up to you, of course. That's all part of your life and your life experience. But at the end of the day, I think you just have to not be concerned with what others tell you. I think it's great to look at reviews of equipment and try to make an educated choice. I've been doing that lately because I am planning on buying a new turntable very soon. I'll be probably talking about that more in the future. But I think what at the end of the day, what matters is how does it sound to you. If it makes you happy, then it makes you happy, and it's a good system. And so just bear that in mind, because I know there's a lot of chatter out here on the internet, and there seems to be a lot of chatter from audiophiles saying that if you listen to this, you're a good person. If you listen to this, you're a bad person, and that's a whole other topic, of course, that I could cover in regards to will crappy turntables destroy your records? Versus good turntables, but there's a lot of videos out there, and I've been watching a lot of them, trust me, because I've been trying to make a choice on a turntable. And I've come to some interesting conclusions about that too, but that's another topic for another day. At any rate, though, once again, everybody, thank you for your comments on the original video. And once again, appreciate your participation in the discussion and looking forward to what else you have to say about this. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.